In Algeria, perhaps a historic day with news that the ailing president, 82-year-old Abdelaziz Bouteflika, will not be seeking a fifth term. It was the announcement that Bouteflika, who's been partially paralyzed since a stroke back in 2013, had been put up for another mandate, despite being treated in a Swiss hospital that had sent Algerians into the streets in their largest numbers in decades. Algerians who had marched peacefully against Bouteflika. The more and more we had seen cracks within what Algerians themselves call le pouvoir, the powers that be, that nebulous cast of oligarchs, of military people, and political leadership. Some still there since independence from France in 1962, including Bouteflika himself, who was in the very first post-independence government in Algeria. But it seems as though divisions amongst themselves had now proven too much, with the people in the streets able to pressure for Bouteflika standing down. We're also getting news, according to television station NNR, that Bouteflika's prime minister, Ahmed Ouyaya, has also tendered his resignation. For more, we're joined here in the studio by France 24's Armin Georgia, and from Algiers by journalist Lamia Ashouch, who is with us. Thank you for being with us again here in the France 24 debate, Lamia. I'll start with you. The reaction coming just a short while ago, were people surprised?
Yes, myself included. We definitely did not expect for this much change to happen so abruptly. Yes, we were expecting some breaking news. We were expecting a big announcement coming from the presidency of the Republic. We were expecting just some, the dismissals of some big names in the government. We were not expecting the announcement that the president is not standing for re-election. So, yes, we are surprised. There is a sense of jubilation. Of course, the news just broke minutes ago or half an hour ago, so the reactions are still fresh and the emotions are running high. The people is feeling some sort of victory, a sense of victory, a sense of triumph over this regime, because in the letter addressed to the people, published in the official press agency, official Algerian press agency, the president, who was speaking directly to the nation, and he specifically said that he never intended to run for a fifth term. That was, to me, that raised some eyebrows. Does it mean that he explicitly says that the regime backing him or the people backing him submitted his files without his approval? Of course, the coming hours and the coming days will reveal more things, but just fresh.
Lami, I'm going to interrupt you because according to NR television, a new prime minister has been named, Noureddine Bedoui, and word coming that there will be a new constitution drawn up, which will then be submitted to a referendum. First off, do we know Noureddine Bedoui?
Yes, lots of breaking news, lots of things happening. I was getting to that. So Prime Minister Ahmed Ouyaya submitted his resignation to the presidency of the Republic. And just now, Noureddine Bedoui, who is Algeria's Minister of Interior Affairs, was named Prime Minister. He's well known in the Algerian political scene. He is the son of the regime, as we say here in Algeria. He's a stern backer of the government. So lots of people are, me included, are saying Bedoui as prime minister is just like Ouyaya as prime minister. It's like replacing by the exact same thing. So we're not sure if this is the best decision, but it's a change. And in the letter, it's been announced that a new post has been created by the president through a presidential decree, which is vice prime minister. The person nominated to this post was Ramtal Lamamra, former Algerian foreign minister and diplomat. And so these are the two names that we know of right now that are gonna supposedly run the new phase, the new transitional phase until the holding of the elections. Now, the elections have Bouteflika said that the elections are postponed and that on April 18th there's not going to be any elections, and that the new phase would be overseen by a national conference of consensus, containing most political players on the Algerian political scene, notably the opposition. I'm just saying that there's breaking news. Okay, so we're getting live images that people are now taking to the streets, celebrating. As I said before, there's a sense of jubilation, there's a sense of victory. Emotions are running high, so I expect the Algeria streets to be flooded tonight. Definitely something to look forward to. Going back to what I was talking about, so yeah, there's going to be new elections organized by a newly formed, let me see, because I'm just reading this now. This is new, an elections overseeing committee or something like that. That's going to be composed of neutral people and new faces. That's what the president said. Also in the letter, he said that there's going to be a new constitution submitted through a national referendum. And so on paper, he basically addressed everything that the opposition asked for, everything that the people on the streets asked for. But I'm sure upon a closer look, I think we need time to really think about all this, because this is all new. But
let's go over, Lamia, let's go over with Armin George and again, the main points of what is coming in. There's so much breaking news in the past hour, beginning with, of course, the news that Abdelaziz Bouteflika, 82 years old, will not be seeking a fifth term.
Yeah, so let's go over the key points. He himself has climbed down, having, of course, previously said he would contest that election and actually filing his papers, or rather somebody else did it for him, his candidacy. So that's the biggest news of this evening, that Bouteflika is not standing for a fifth term. Perhaps the second biggest, most important news now is that this election has been postponed, and now we're hearing that it will not be held until the end of a consultation, something called a national conference. We'll talk more about that later, but this actually was an idea mooted by the government even before this election, the idea of a national dialogue leading to constitutional reform. So you've got Bouteflika not standing, election postponed, and thirdly, the long-serving Prime Minister Ahmed Ouyaya now out of power as well. So those probably the three key elements at the moment. All
right, and again, Lamia Shush, the news that there's going to be a new constitution drawn up, submitted to a referendum. Those who control the reins of power still very much there, as you pointed out. The new Prime Minister was until now the Interior Minister.
Definitely, until now he was Interior Minister, so his function has just been changed. We don't know how this is going to play out, and most importantly, we don't know what this new post of Vice Prime Minister will entail. In the media circles, we were expecting the nomination of Ramtal Lamamra, the now Vice Prime Minister, to be the new Prime Minister. But this creation of this new post, it's still to be analyzed, I think. We really don't know what this entails, but those two figures, I'm just scanning reactions as we go right now. These two figures are controversial figures. They both current ministers or former ministers in the regime. And so the people are not exactly thrilled about them. But I think now Algerians are not really thinking about this or analyzing this. It's just there's an extreme sense of jubilation. I myself, my eyes were tearing up before. I was just like, it was too much to grasp. But I think the coming days we'll see the reactions. I'm expecting the reactions of the opposition. It's really interesting to see how this will play out and what they're going to say and how they're going to react to this. But definitely what we know is that President Abdelaziz Bouteflika is still going to be president. Since the elections are postponed, we don't know that when are the next elections to be held, and so he will still be president until then. And so I don't know how I feel about this also. So I think we're cautiously optimistic. It's definitely a good step. It's definitely a victory. Because if you compare this to what happened in the Arab Spring in 2011, most regimes were violently overthrown. There was not a peaceful transition. We definitely don't want that in Algeria. We want a peaceful transition and a smooth transition of power. And so this seems like this is what the regime wants, and we'll see what the coming days will bring with these changes. Just now, breaking news: President Abdelaziz Bouteflika allegedly received the head of the army, Ahmed Saleh, and that the head of the army gave him a brief on the security situation on the Algerian borders and in the national territory. This is interesting also because we know that transitional periods, in politics and in governments, violent or the security situation to deteriorate during those times. And so it's very, very important that the army stays in control of the country and has an even tighter grip on, maybe some malicious sides that want to, interfere or in the middle of
who's in charge right now, who's making those big decisions, something we'll pick up on when we come back. Many questions, and as Lamia Ashouch was saying, the first celebrations witnessed in the capital Algiers and elsewhere upon the news that after more than 2 weeks of pressure from the street, Algeria's ailing president will not be seeking a fifth term. Stay with us. More to come in this special edition of the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. A special edition of the France 24 debate. Breaking news out of Algiers. It was the official press agency a little before 7 p.m. local time that announced that the country's 82-year-old president, Abdelaziz Bouteflika, who's been partially paralyzed because of a stroke since 2013, he'd been receiving treatment from a Swiss hospital, returning home on Sunday, news that he will not be seeking a fifth term. As those protests entered a third week, we're digesting the news that there's going to be a constitution that's going to be rewritten. There's going to be a referendum. The presidential poll's been delayed. We're talking about it with journalist Lamia Ashouch, who joins us from Algiers. Here in the studio, we're with France 24's Armin Georgian. Abdelaziz Bouteflika, who had been in the very first cabinet after independence from France in 1962. Both he and the head of the armed forces had fought in the bloody war of independence from France beforehand. And it's going to be certainly a changing of the guard to come what may. Whoever is the next pick, it'll be the first time that it will be a leader in Algeria who did not take part in that independence struggle. Claire Muffson has more.
President Abdelaziz Bouteflika remains an outsized figure in Algerian politics, despite his flagging health. The 82-year-old uses a wheelchair and has been seen in public only a handful of times since suffering a stroke in 2013, fueling constant speculation on his health. He was first elected president in 1999 with the essential backing of the military. He pledged to put an end to a decade of civil war that claimed some 150,000 lives, opening dialogue with the Islamist militants and armed factions, and later offering amnesty to fighters in hiding. He also prioritized the economy. Thanks to soaring oil prices and key trade links with the EU, Algeria's finances prospered, but revenues weren't equally distributed, and poverty deepened in some areas to unprecedented levels. Bouteflika has won every election since 1999 by more than 80% of the vote. Results opponents have called fraudulent. Strikes over social and economic grievances have grown frequent. More than a quarter of Algerians under 30 are unemployed, fueling resentment and regional protests. Bouteflika's candidacy was announced on February 9th, sparking unprecedented protests across the country, as Algerians united to deem him unfit to stand.
And also joining us, historian Philip Naylor, who teaches at Marquette University. Thank you for being with us from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. When we spoke to you earlier, Abdelaziz Bouteflika was still running for a fifth term. The events of the past 2 weeks have caught the world by surprise. Have the events of today caught you by surprise?
I'm not surprised. We talked earlier about the Constitution having to be reworked a bit or set into play here, and it has been. So we'll see now what will happen with regard to a successor.
We'll see what happens regarding a successor. Part one of our discussion, Lamia Ashouch saying it doesn't bode exactly very well when we see that the caretaker prime minister was, until now, the interior minister.
Yeah. What we have to remember here is that the Pouvoir, the oligarchy that has controlled Algeria since independence, has within itself fissures. It has discontent, and they apparently have come to some kind of a conclusion of what they want to do. The arrangement that they have suggested still does not follow accurately Article 88 of the Constitution and 89. Nevertheless, we'll have to see what happens on the street, basically.
With Abdelaziz Bouteflika now, who will no longer be the president, what does that do when you mentioned that inner circle where there are cracks? What does it do, for instance, regarding his brother, who wielded a lot of influence up until now?
Well, it's hard to prognosticate here, but I do believe that Said Bouteflika will not be one of the principal players here. I think it'll still rest upon the army playing an important role.
It'll still rest upon the army playing an important role. Lamia Ashouch, when we talk about in Algeria, le pouvoir, the powers that be, this nebulous group that's made up of what? Politicians, military folks, and business people who make the big decisions far from the public eye. At this point in time, can they agree amongst themselves on what to do next? Lamia Ashouch?
You were talking about the Pouvoir. I missed the second part of the question. I'm sorry.
Can those who control the country right now, Philip Naylor described it as the oligarchy in charge, can they put all of this back in a bottle and come up with some kind of an arrangement by which they hold the reins of power?
That seems to be the case. I'm just looking at reactions as we go right now. And definitely, as I said before, Algerians are cautiously optimistic. They are saying that any transition period that's led by the regime is not really a transition period. And this seems to be the case right now. The regime wants to...
We seem to be having issues there with the Skype connection with Algiers. We're joined here in the studio by Myriam Amelal. Myriam, we got cut off mid-sentence there with Lamia, but she seemed to be saying people are cautious when they've been cautious. Confirm. They've been cautious, even though we've seen all this enthusiasm in the streets. It seems like they've been cautious throughout the last 2 weeks.
I confirm the people I could join today after the announcement that President Bouteflika will withdraw and won't run for a fifth mandate, told me that they're waiting for what is next, who will replace him. And some people I could join told me, but the problem is that who will lead the country during this transition, who will be at the head of the country? That's the question, because they're not only asking President Bouteflika to withdraw, but the whole system. And the people are cautious. For them, it's a victory because they have obtained something, because the regime was not totally deaf to their demands. But on the other hand, they're very cautious and they don't want to be manipulated.
All right, so far it's been peaceful protests, everybody wary of not returning to the violence that engulfed Algeria in the 90s and early 2000s with a civil war that may have claimed up to 200,000 lives. They're going out of their way throughout these 2 weeks to show that they're civic-minded, that they're responsible. Now, with Bouteflika's name will be off the ballot when that election finally happens, will it be enough to curb those demands that you mentioned?
It's difficult to answer to this question. I think that we will have to wait to see how will be the reaction of people. People now are a bit shocked by this announcement. They thought that President Bouteflika came back yesterday to run for this mandate. They are to some extent waiting for what is next to decide whether the movement will keep on. If they will go and take to the streets again tomorrow and the days after. I think that the movement is clear from the beginning. There's an evolution in the movement. They have decided to go to the street to ask President Bouteflika not to run for a fifth mandate, and step by step they realized that the real problem was the system. And I think that the system. They won't give up this contestation, this movement, until the system will leave.
They won't give up.
They won't give up. Yes.
I don't know if we still have Lamia Chouch with us from Algiers. Are you back with us, Lamia? All right, we seem to have lost the connection with Lamia Chouch in Algiers. We'll try to reconnect with her. Let's cross now to Spain. Francis Gilles, senior researcher at the Barcelona Center for International Affairs. What's your reaction to the news that the name of Abdelaziz Bouteflika has been withdrawn and elections postponed in Algeria?
I think, basically, I think it's extremely good news, because to get to the result without any blood having been shed is an achievement of sorts in a regime like that. So I think that is extremely important. And it's also probably got lessons for some other Arab countries as well. It shows that popular pressure, when applied without violence, because one of the most striking things about the demonstrators in the last 3 weeks is their maturity, their sense of wit, their refusal to confront the police. So we've seen the police protecting the demonstrations. We've seen people cleaning up the trash after the demonstrations. We've seen slogans which are sophisticated, witty, which would actually put to shame many demonstrators in Europe. So I think we've seen a mature people. And I think this is a revelation for many people in Europe, notably in France.
Notably in France, that's a reference to the Yellow Vest movements, I guess, which have proved violent on several occasions. Francis, let me ask you, this idea of a new constitution submitted to a national referendum, what do you make of it?
Well, I mean, we have to wait and see. Apparently, the man who's going to preside over all this is the former minister and ambassador and special UN envoy, Lakhdar Brahimi. I have known Lakhdar Brahimi since I finished my thesis. He was one of my mentors when as ambassador in London, I started as a journalist. He is a man of great talent, very well connected internationally, a revolutionary, of course. And in a way, if he can act as a kind of father figure in this transmission from one generation to another, that would be a very great achievement. And I think there are chances now, because you have to have someone whom the regime sort of trusts in broad sense. And Lakhdar Brahimi, he has been minister, ambassador. You know, he is part of the system, though he spent more time outside Algeria than inside Algeria in the last 30, 40 years. So I think we have to see how things go. But I think it's extremely good news. The question now is going to be how you don't have to change the constitution. You have to amend the constitution, probably go back to 1996, which allowed 2 presidential mandates. On the other hand, there had been some changes made in the Bouteflika years, which were for the good, notably the recognition of Berber as the second official language of Algeria. I think this is fundamental because there's been so many conflicts between Berber-speaking and Arab-speaking, and the recognition that Berber is the bedrock of Algeria, indeed of all of North Africa, is fundamental to the identity of Algeria. So I think you can tweak or change the constitution. You go back to 1996, you add some of the things which were added afterwards, and you take away this, what I consider damnable, and most Algerians do, these changes which allowed Bouteflika to be president for life, because I think that's the bane of every Arab republican system, is presidents end up as monarchs. So we have to go back to a 2-term president.
Philip Naylor, do you agree that Algeria can envisage a quote-unquote soft landing in its transition away from the generation that fought for independence from France?
Look, I think
Philip Naylor.
Yeah, I just wanted. Yeah, yes, I do. I agree with Francis's analysis, and it's good to have him on the panel. Hello, Francis. The point is here that Algerians are a proud people. Algerians have done themselves very well here, given the protests and how the protests were handled. I can't say that I am enthusiastic, but I am encouraged. And the reason why I say that is because the Pouvoir is entrenched in so many aspects of Algerian life, and that does worry me. But at the same time, a constitutional change, something that Algerians can identify with, hopefully, and identify positively with, will hopefully create an atmosphere of conciliation.
How far can we? Let's talk about that worry that you have, Philip Naylor. How far can we push the analogy with Egypt, where decades of military rule mean that you have a lot of people who have both military power and vested interests in the economy?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and there are similarities, and about the Mubarak with the of Bouteflika. But I mean, there are important differences. Islamists, for example, not playing an important role with regard to Bouteflika and the protests, as of course in Egypt we had the Muslim Brotherhood. But yeah, there are serious investments that the Pouvoir has in the economy and then throughout Algeria.
Mariam Memel, I don't want to underplay just how many people were out in the streets last Friday.
I think, according to people in Algiers and a lot of sources of journalists, they told me there were more than 1 million people last Friday, which is comparable to the Independence Day, which is extraordinary because those protesters are comparing their protest to a revolution, a second revolution. They tend to say, and they said, people I could join told me, our parents, our grandparents obtained the independence. They freed the land, but not the people. And today we have to free the people. We want a second republic. And for them, it is a revolution. And this last Friday was shows that they really want to change things because more than 1 million people and protesters in Algiers is really a large crowd.
Mariam, we're looking at live images courtesy of television station NNR from the Algerian capital. Perhaps we can listen in to see if there's any if we can hear any cars honking, because we heard Lamia Ashush talking about the celebrations. No, it's the commentary from NR television. But apparently celebrations had started in some parts of the.
People like John told me that they were waiting for the news on the state TV. What is funny is that the majority of people never look for the news on state TV because it's so official and they prefer watching other TVs. But today, one of them told me it's the first time for many years that I'm waiting for the news on state TV because we want to know what is this announcement. We don't want to be too happy to, we want to know the exact changes that they will announce. Because, you know, Francois, President Bouteflika last week, when he submitted his candidacy, he said, if I'm again the president, if you vote for me, if you elect me, I will organize elections. He's saying the same thing. They stopped the electoral process, but he's still here. That's the problem. People want to know whether he will stay on power till those elections will be organized. And some others told me that they are not sure that it is constitutional to stop the electoral process for no real reason. And you see the...
Francis Gillis, let me ask you, you heard Myriam talking about the caution of Algerians that she has spoken to. You yourself were mentioning how Algerians throughout these more than 2 weeks have gone out of their way to show how responsible they are, how peaceful they are when they're demonstrating. Is part of this the lessons that have been learned from other countries where the Arab Spring got out of control at times?
Well, I think there are 2 or 3 points. First of all, the crowds in Algiers, as has been said, are the greatest since independence in July 1962. That is the measure. 25% of the Algerians between the ages of 15 and 60 have been in the street. According to senior police officials, I spoke to 1 million people in the streets of Algiers last Friday. This is colossal. This changes the whole game. In a way, it's such a seismic shift that you see after last Friday, one could not imagine the army shooting at the people. Then yesterday, we had an editorial in the army paper, and this matters, El Jaish, saying the army has always been on the side of the people. We will never be against the people. Within 3 hours, the chief of staff, General Gaid Salah, who's a corrupt, and I won't say more, man close to Bouteflika, ate his hat, and instead of threatening a scenario a la Syrienne, he said, no, I respect the Algerian people, blah, blah, blah. Right. So things have changed fundamentally, and I don't think you can put the genie back in the bottle. The people of Algeria who were chased from the theatre of politics in the summer of 1962 are back on the stage, and I see no way they're going to be kicked off again. I think it's as simple as this. And the other thing is that having covered for the Financial Times and the BBC the events of 88, 92, when you had tens of thousands of Islamists in their djellabas and their ill-kept beards marching through Algiers, it felt like death. What we have seen with young men and young women of a younger generation, but also older people, some women veiled, most of them not, witty slogans, we've seen a kind of flip side of Algeria. It's a side of Algeria most people outside Algeria couldn't even imagine existed 3 weeks ago. And here we are. So now the problem is to manage a transition. The other point I'd like to make, which is very important, you may have corrupt generals at the top. You certainly do. And by God, they're corrupt. And not only them, but the cronies around Bouteflika. But Algeria's army, 600,000 strong, is full of honest, very well-educated officers who are clean. The other thing, the comparison with Egypt, one's got to be careful. First, Algeria went through a revolution between 54 and 62, which Egypt did not do when Nasser took power. Secondly, the Egyptian army owns about half the economy. Now, whatever the influence of the army of senior officers in the economy and the rents they might be able to get, there's nothing like it in Algeria. The army doesn't own half the economy. So I think we've got to be very careful. And frankly, comparisons between Egypt and Algeria at this stage, I find very unhelpful. Algeria has a history of its own, and it is reacting in a way. It's not an Arab Spring, it's something else. As the people around the table, because I can't see them, rightly said, people are going back to the slogans of 1962. They are singing songs in the faculties today which go back to the 1950s. So they're reconnecting with a revolution which was confiscated in 1962. That is the measure of what is happening in Algeria.
All right, and we expect a night of celebration, said earlier to us, Lamia Shusha. I want to thank you, Francis Gillis, for joining us from Spain, Philip Naylor from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I want to thank the rest of our panelists. Stay with us because Media Watch is next. All right, and we say hello to James Creedon. James, it's all happening fast, a bit of improvisation, as we can see.
We have pictures, live pictures of what's going on in Algeria, so I thought it was going to be maybe coming in with something original in that regard, because lots of people are sharing that online as well, Francois. You can see pictures here of people in the streets of Algiers celebrating, basically. Hashtag no to a fifth mandate, no au cinquième mandat. And so there's a lot of images like that going up online. This is another one here showing, well, it's photographed sideways, unfortunately, but I think you get the idea. People are in a celebratory mode. And this is just a third and final one for now. Actually, I think in this particular image here, you see a woman consulting her telephone and getting the news in the moment, if you like, and just, you know, celebrations breaking out.
And Miriam
right
pointing out a moment ago that this is the one time when Algerians will be paying close attention to state television's 8 o'clock news program.
It's like, what exactly are they going to say, and how are they going to say it? So in any case, just images and video going up, that's the first thing, and we can see this is all in the aftermath of 3 weeks of images, incredibly impressive images such as this, showing a very, I suppose, united and motivated Algerian people. I think this image says a lot as well. Algerian flags out of almost every single window on that particular street. So just some of the comments coming through. These are mostly in French, some in English as well. I couldn't translate the Arabic ones, unfortunately. Bouteflika throws in the sponge. The elections pushed back. This is sublime. The people showing their determination, their strength, their grandeur, and they have caused the powers that be to fold. Extraordinary in Algeria, people power works, says Alexander Clarkson on social media. So a lot of people putting up expressions of support and congratulations to, I suppose, just in the collective sense, the people of Algeria. Peaceful demonstrations in Algeria over a proposed 5th term for the ailing Abdelaziz Bouteflika seem to have succeeded. Chapeau bas to the Algerian people, and good luck for what comes next. Some bilingual tweeting there, and indeed a lot of people talking about what will come next. J'ai crié de joie à la maison. I cried with joy. I screamed with joy at home. But the battle does not stop now. Algeria until Algeria is finally free and democratic. So I'm showing you some of the early messages, which is just, people are just celebrating, but then there are some more cautious tweets.
Still that air of caution that Miriam was describing.
And then there are the tweets that are outright critical. This is a journalist based in Algiers, Khaled Drareini. And no 5th term, but an extended 4th term. This is scandalous and this is disgraceful. So that's...
This is what people told me. People I could join. They told me it's the problem is that he stays. He's not leaving.
He's not gone till he's gone.
Absolutely, that's the problem.
All right.
So there are a lot of comments like that going up online as well. People sort of saying, "What's going on here?" This is another one of that nature, Francois. No, not presenting yourself while delaying the presidential elections. Is this not? Is this not the same thing as Bouteflika actually staying in power along with his clique, along with the inner circle? So lots of comments like that.
The story is far from over. Yes. I want to thank you, James Creedon. I want to thank our journalists. I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank you for being with us here in this special edition of the France 24 debate.